Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. I'm Katie, or I'm the coordinator of our University Express program, and we're joined with Michael Olear. Welcome, Michael.
Hello.
We
Thanks
appreciate
for
you
coming.
being here. Quickly, some housekeeping. We are recording the session and I'll try to post it on the website in the near future. And as Michael goes through his presentation today, feel free to type all of your questions and comments into that Q&A panel. So if you're on a computer, it's located at the lower right-hand side of your screen. You just have to expand it. You'll see that text box, send your questions to me. If you're on a tablet or smartphone, touch your screen. That brings up your control panel. You'll see a circle with 3 dots. There you'll find your Q&A. So same thing, in that text box, send your stuff right to me. But we got a lot of things going on today and we're gonna have a ton of fun. So I'm gonna turn it right over to Michael for his introduction of himself and our topic. So it's all you, Michael.
All right, great. I'm Michael Olear, and I'm a licensed associate broker with MJ Peterson Real Estate. And my first career was social work. I have an MSW also. So about 20 years ago, we decided we'd combine the two things. We've been just doing a lot of like sort of a hybrid social work real estate service for a long time, and that's kind of how I ended up here, because we've been specializing in older adults for that time period. As far as today, we're going to talk about is understanding condos, townhouses, and patio homes. And one of the first things to learn when you're dealing with real estate is real estate people throw terms around like crazy. Colonials, capes, and condos, townhouses, to the point. And then there's just a lot of misunderstanding as far as what things actually are. And there's frequently incorrect labeling that ends up on different things. We're going to try to keep it as objective as possible. And I don't know how much fun it's going to be, but we're going to try to get some learning. maybe we'll have time for a couple crazy stories and jokes and stuff, because there's some things that have happened over the years that have been pretty interesting. So I work throughout Erie and Niagara County, and that's our link up with Katie through Erie County Senior Services, and we're really grateful to them and all their sponsors, who make this series possible. And I'm sure Katie will go through those at the end, so who's funding this. So I'm going to share the screen. It's going to take me just a second to get this right. Okay. All right. So I already talked about me. Let's go to the next thing. All right. So what is a condo? So one of the most important things to understand is that a condo is not necessarily, it's not a specific type of structure or living unit. What condo actually means is it's a style of ownership. That is really, the exact, description of what a condominium is. And it can come in a lot of different forms. High-rise buildings, multiple apartments. You can have, detached homes that are actually have condo status. And that means that there's a special approval that's been granted by, in our case, it's New York State, to run as a condo association. So what do you actually buy when you're buying a condominium? What you're buying shared ownership of common elements, and you actually buy your interior space. So everything that's on the inside of the skin of the walls is yours. The shared elements, which would be examples of that, would be, the access driveway, the hallways. Maybe there's a basement, where people have individual storage units that they own, but they also have, a walkway to get to those storage units. I have a condominium right now that's being sold that actually, when you take title to it, you actually take title to 3 different parcels. There's 3 different section block lot numbers. That's a unique identifier. There's one for the storage area that's in the basement. There's one for the living unit, and there's actually a separate one just for the mailbox. So it's really important if you're buying something. We'll talk about this a little later, that you understand everything that is actually being offered for sale. Here's some other examples: recreation areas. Frequently, the land that development is sitting on is that is common ground. That's everybody owns that. The roof on the structure, quite frequently, when it's a condominium, unless they're detached units, that is owned in common by everyone. And as far as the interior space, what we're talking about here is I refer to it as the skin. So behind the skin is the plumbing, the heating runs, insulation. What about windows and doors? Generally speaking, windows and doors are typically the responsibility of the individual owner. So sometimes what will happen is there will be some type of negotiated price to replace windows at a particular development, and the individual owners can opt in to get that special pricing. They also have the option to do nothing and just continue to use the windows that they currently have. What about water leaks? This is really kind of like one of the things where people can lose their mind sometimes because they're waiting for, repairs to be made. But typically, water leaks, if they come from above, are usually the responsibility of the association, and that would mean even fixing the whatever the damage was, within your unit, if it was caused by somebody else. If you have a 2-floor unit and you overfill your bathtub, ruining your first floor ceiling, that would definitely be your own responsibility. But if it's, say, some plumbing from the wall broke, or maybe somebody on the 5th floor overran their bathtub, ruining your ceiling on your 2nd floor, in that case, without a doubt, typically that is the association's responsibility. Some other characteristics. There's typically mailboxes are at a central location, just for the postal service typically identifies one point where they deliver to. Very similar to, you'll find that with apartment complexes too. There's also membership in an HOA. HOA is, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, but it's governed by an elected board that follows the bylaws that establish the condominium. And they're responsible for keeping track of the money, making sure that there's adequate reserves, in the event there's capital improvements that need to be taken care of. And also, the board typically is elected. It's frequently, being on a board in a condo association can be difficult, I think, because in one sense, you want people to like you, but also on the other hand, sometimes you're going to make some tough choices. And, in terms of raising the fees or, but the biggest thing, we'll talk about a little more later too, is about reserve accounts, and making sure there's adequate money there if things need to be taken care of. As far as in New York State, if you have HOA status, there's a lower assessment for tax purposes on school tax. And really the main reason why the taxation is a little bit lower is because the association is providing different services that the town probably doesn't have to take care of. Quite frequently, there's a private access road that has to be plowed. A lot of times with sanitation, getting rid of garbage, There's some associations out there. There's one in Clarence where they actually have their own sewer line. They eventually do hook up to the public sewer, but the line for the entire development is private. So that reduction in assessment and thus lower taxes is compensation to the individuals because you're also paying an HOA fee, that's going towards paying for services that the government typically pays for. Yeah, a little more on this condos with garages. We were talking about the multiple SPL numbers. There are people that buy condominiums and their realtor doesn't know, or their lawyer doesn't pay attention, or whatever, and they end up buying the condo that they thought had a garage, but they don't get the garage. Most of the time, people play pretty nice about that, but that happens on, I think, on somewhat of a regular basis. You have to make sure that that's in your contract. So there's a spot, an open spot on page 8 where anything that's unique or unusual needs to be entered. Like, for instance, I just had one where there was a vacant lot next to the house, and the seller was including that vacant lot in the sale. A separate SPL for that vacant land also needed to go on page 8 so that everybody knows that that person is buying both of these parcels. So it's definitely the case with garages. With the place I talked to you about that has a separate SPL for the mailbox, the storage area, and the living unit, all 3 of those SPL numbers need to be in the contract of sale, or, technically you're buying a place without a mailbox if you forget to put it in. So, this is something, like I said, people generally play nice about it, but just important to know because sometimes people maybe wouldn't play nice about it. A garage a lot of times will sell for $10,000 to $20,000 depending on what the demand is. So the monthly HOA assessment, that is set by the HOA board of directors, and a lot of times they have a property manager. There's 3 or 4 in our area that are, they do probably 70 to 80 to 90% of the units. They're just really set up for this, and because they know what they're doing, they're very well organized. They just take care of most of them in the Western New York area. The different things that are included in the HOA assessment, a portion of that goes towards the master insurance policy. That's somebody falls down on the driveway and cracks their head. That's insurance is primary. Common area maintenance, quite frequently that's landscaping, snow removal, probably some work around the sign, and making things pretty to a degree. And then also reserve accounts. So a reserve account is absolutely critical. It's something to really be very aware of if you're buying into an HOA, and you want to make sure that that there's a regular pattern of putting money away for reserves. A really good question to ask, and I think I actually have it later in the presentation, but I'll talk about it now, is special assessments. A really good question to ask is there a history of special assessments, or what is the history of special assessments? And what that means is that there wasn't enough money to pay for the roof, so everybody had to pay extra for a while. So I'm going to talk about that a little more later. And then HOA assessments frequently, if the units are of various size, are frequently prorated a bit based on the size of the unit. So if you have a really small unit versus someone that has, something that's 3 times the size, they're typically going to pay more than you are. Here we are on reserve accounts. Okay. This examples of big ticket items, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of: roof, driveways, recreation areas, sewer and water lines. So one of the key things to do is to know, well, you know how long a roof is going to last. So there should be a budget for reserves for all the big tickets. How much is it to replace a driveway? So what you do is you make what the board needs to do is decide, okay, we've got a 10-year-old roof. We're going to need a new roof in 10 years. How much is that going to cost if we do it this year and then add a couple percent for inflation every year? All this needs to be calculated, and so that there's a sufficient amount of money that is being put away. It's a portion of the HOA fee that everybody pays each month. And so, again, if there's no money to cover something, there's going to be special assessments. See how sad he is because of that? He wasn't expecting it. But that's there's actually, I tell this story. There was I remember at one point, this was a long time ago, there was a place in Amherst that people loved it. They were like, the units were really spacious, and the monthly HOA was really low. They weren't putting any money away. So it ended up at one point, all the bills came due for all this stuff. People were paying like an extra $500-600 a month for like years, to just try to take care of the roofs and the gutters and, driveway and stuff like that. So something to be sensitive to. And, quite recently, the town of Amherst went through all the multifamily, inspected all the exterior porches, and it turned into special assessments for a bunch of places because they just really didn't anticipate that was going to happen. But so many of them had porches that they had to replace. So steps prior to purchase, the condo documents, that would be the offering plan, the budget, the financial documents, minutes of HOA board meetings. All of these things are called, the condo docs. And the contract in Western New York says that there's a 10-day period after you sign the contract where the seller of the unit needs to give you all those documents. And then you get a 21-day review period to go through it all. Excuse me, I need to drink water. So out of all the documents, you're not going to change the offering plan. You definitely should look at the numbers, and the reserves and all that kind of stuff. But you're going to be looking at a lot of numbers. You're not really going to know as much what you're looking at. One of the really good things to look at is the minutes of, say, the HOA board meetings for the last maybe 6 months. If you get a look at those, you really get an idea what's going on. Like, for instance, got another complaint from a tenant of 6F, because of all the noise from the people upstairs. You read it and, hey, wait a minute, I'm buying 6F. So, it's not funny, but it's funny. It's good to really read that stuff, because the other thing that could be in there would be, discussions about special assessments. That's really where you get the scoop on what's really going on, is by reading the minutes of the meetings for probably around the last 6 months. So if they tell you that they can't get them for you, that's nonsense. You can get them. So the other thing too, if you want to be, more progressively aggressive about it in a nice way, is to ask for the name of the contact individual for the property manager, and then just go to them directly and say, hey, you got this, and that can be one way around it, but for sure you want to look at that stuff. Oh, I just already went through all this, kind of got ahead of myself. So this is everything I just said, all of these things. But the key thing is really here. Number one, the board minutes. You really want to look at that. So how does insurance work? You need to talk to an insurance agent. I can't give you insurance advice, okay? I know enough to know you need to talk to somebody because it's not the same type of insurance for when you're buying a house. It's going to cover items, within your unit only. It covers you for liability for guests who are at the property, even if they're at, on the commonly owned space. But there's a different kind of insurance, so you have to talk to them. It's typically a little bit less too, the cost of it. So, and we talked about the reduced taxation. I think I got ahead of myself a little bit because the HOA provides services that the government doesn't have to. Now, what is a townhouse? Important to know, this is another term that kind of gets thrown around a lot. A townhouse is a specific building style. And how do you tell what that is? It's where you have common side walls. So this is when you're right next to each other with nobody on top. Sometimes they have a basement, sometimes they have a garage. They can be attached or detached. And they can be 1-story, 2-story, or even 3-story. There's a development not too far from where I live that's called Wedgwood. And the buildings there have a single story on both sides. And then the middle of the building is all 2-story units. So you can have really different configurations of that. So again, with a townhouse, what are you buying? It's the structure within the walls. The one thing that's different is a lot of times you're buying the land that it's actually sitting on. And then the deck, patio, front porch, those are often included. Sometimes there's even a little patch of grass in the back that gets included with it as well. So a patio home is a single family development with no different from a typical single family development in so many ways. The only difference is there are zoning variances. So there's zoning requirements where for a subdivision, you have to have a certain amount of room between your house and the house next door, or there needs to be a minimum lot size. And you see these battles in the paper over and over again, I'm sure, of how many units the developer wants to put in, and the town or other residents don't want as many units in there. And this grapple goes on and on for a while until it gets worked out. But in terms of a patio home is nothing more than just a housing subdivision, but it does have zoning variances, and these allow for increased density. Density means that you're going to have more units in a specific place or than typically you would with a normal subdivision. A lot of times they have an HOA for exterior maintenance. Quite frequently, though, they do not have reduced taxation because of the process that is required with New York State. A lot of times it takes years to get HOA status, and a lot of the builders when they're doing patio home developments don't want to bother. So the taxes end up being whatever the taxes end up being. And with a patio home, what are you buying? You're buying just like you're buying a house. You're buying the entire structure. You're buying the land around the house. Typically, there is membership in an HOA, and there's usually kind of a loose association to take care of, lawn, snow. Maybe there's some ponds that need to be treated periodically, things like that. A planned unit development this is typically single family homes with front and backyards. Best examples we have in Western New York are Ransom Oaks and also the Audubon community. So with both of those places, there's recreation areas, There's a very small fee that people pay each year to be part of that planned unit development. It's not an optional fee. If you own a house there, you have to pay the fee. But quite frequently, there's various amenities that you don't have to use, but you could use. Clubhouse, pool, tennis court, walking paths. And a little bit on right sizing and moving. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. There's 4 phases in the process. Is deciding what to do with personal property. What's your money plan? Are you going to fix things or sell as is? And who do you need to hire to help you? You know, the biggest thing that people do wrong, I think, is they try to do everything themselves. And it's far better to get assistance, you know, with a lot of things, just so you're not running up and down stairs and trying to clean out basements and, you know, end up getting sick or getting hurt in the process. That's the number one priority, is that you stay safe. One way to decide on simple property or personal property is to do make a simple list for each room. What are you going to keep? What are you going to give away? What are you going to sell? And then leave a column for I don't know. I also, you know, highly advise people to find a spot in the house where you can put everything you're donating or giving away, and just get out of the room, get it someplace that's easy to stage for maybe Salvation Army to come and get it, you know, near a front door, in a garage, near a back door, or something like that. And as far as the financial plan, it's important that you have key advisors. An elder law attorney is really good, a financial professional. The community center caseworkers that are paid by senior services are great to talk to. They're very knowledgeable and they would have your best interest in mind. It's good to get really smart about what your options are. And fixing or selling as is, yeah, I do look like that when I'm doing stuff around the house. So key things to consider are, if there's things that are going to prevent financing, you really should take a look at, you know, taking care of that. You know, if you got, you know, a hazardous electrical wire coming in the house, or I don't know, if the roof's coming off. I mean, it just puts you in a category where you have to sell to people cash only. And a lot of times it's better to take care of it, just because the price you get is just so much better. Usually advise people to set a limit on how much you're going to spend and then stay within that budget. The biggest thing you can do is declutter, and that way, that's how you can spend next to nothing and make a lot of money. And as far as hiring people to help, you know, senior move manager, aging life care specialists, there's a lot of great folks out there. Estate sale people, handymen, handy ladies, lots of folks out there that can help you get things done. And I do seminars for other groups, and here's my contact information.
Thank you, Michael. While you're figuring out how to stop sharing, I just want to, again, thank you for that presentation. I can also take it
Oh,
away
you know
for
what?
you.
I made it really small here.
That's
Ah,
okay.
thanks for doing that.
You're welcome. All right, so we have a couple questions here. So some things you've answered, but this one is, can you do renovations inside a condo?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay, the one thing that you know, if you're knocking out walls or something, you know, that is something that for sure, you know, you need to get prior approval on. You can't change the structure. If you want to just do a kitchen, you know, you can go ahead and replace the kitchen. But if you want to knock out walls and make it, take a 3 bedroom and turn it into a 2 with one really big bedroom, you do need to get approval for that.
Gotcha. Now, my own follow-up question to that, is that the same for townhouses?
It typically would be, yeah, it typically would be if it's governed by an HOA. If it's a patio home, you can go ahead and do whatever you want.
All right, thank you. This next question is, are there age requirements for patio home neighborhoods?
Hmm. Sometimes there are deed restrictions. Um, it's called a deed restriction when, but I don't, for patio homes, I don't think so. I really don't think so. Um, I've never heard of any, and that's not, and even with condominiums, or there's nothing like that. I think that actually might be discrimination.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks,
but
Michael.
like with apartments, it's their prerogative to do that. It's a really different thing.
All right, thank you. This next question is, can you do a life estate with a townhouse?
That is a legal question it's above my pay grade. Um, my layman answer is yes, but I'm just a layman. I think you need to consult with an attorney.
All right, thanks, Michael. This next question is it okay to have everything out of the house when you sell it, or should the rooms never be empty?
It's far better, and the natural inclination for most folks is to clear everything out first. And it's 80% of the time, we're encouraging people to just simply thin out what they have and sell the house with their furniture in it and things on the walls. Just it looks so much better. It's just if you take everything out, you show literally every blemish. And I say this in the seminar every time that I do it is there's this experience people have buying when they walk in a place and there's nothing in it. They think they're going to get a deal, and it's harder to you know get that get past that with people sometimes. Plus it looks a lot warmer if it's set up. So we do a lot of times we'll go through the checklist with people room by room and tell them what they have. You want to get personal photos, family member photos out. You want to pick up, you don't want to have like a lot of things like in the corner. I remember my mom's house, she had like the fake little dog in the corner. I mean, our house now, I mean, we have stuff, you got like, I don't know, a basket full of Afghans, and it's summer. We have that. I admit it. It's still there from the winter. But like if you're selling the house, you got to get all that stuff out. The more visual space you open up, the larger it appears. The general rule of thumb is for like an end table, you want to have a lamp and one other item. That's all, nothing else. So it's
Okay.
far better. I think that and the money that you get is higher when you sell the house when it's still furnished.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I'm also guilty of still having blankets around. I use those in the
Don't
summer.
like
All
to be
right.
cold, right?
Yeah, I hate it. The air
Yeah,
conditioning's on, you feel silly.
that's right.
Okay, this question. I just started looking to see what's available, and now I understand why everyone says it's a competitive market. How long has the real estate market been this competitive? Do you have any sense of when conditions may calm down and become at least a bit more reasonable? Thanks.
Well, no, I don't. right now it's really out of whack, and it's progressively um, been going in this direction for quite a while. I'd say several years that the amount of inventory is severely reduced, and then that makes it crazier to buy houses, single family house or even condominiums. I mean, the condo market itself, if you're asking about condos, the same degree of demand is not there for condos as it is for detached single family homes. So it depends on, what you're asking about. But there's a variety of factors. I mean, it's just starting to be reported in the media. It was in the Wall Street Journal maybe a few weeks ago. But this is something our association's been talking about for, National Association's been talking about for 5 or 6 years, is there's a lot of people buying houses, or, institutional investors buying single family homes and renting them out. And that has severely, severely reduced the supply. So you have a lot of non-owner occupied properties that are just no longer in the mix, for that shuffle between buyers and sellers. So that's really reduced the amount of inventory. Like I don't know how to get the word out about it, but I think there should be some kind of hefty tax for people from other areas to buy a single family home around, because it's awful. I mean, it's like, they'll come in, I mean, they have cash to buy, and then you have, um, Al and Sophia from want to buy their first home, and then all of a sudden they've got an FHA mortgage competing with, a cash contract. It just really puts them at a disadvantage. But in a lot of ways, it's better for a neighborhood, I think, to have the homes be owner occupied. I mean, that's typically what deteriorates a neighborhood. And even though maybe the people that move in are very, very nice, it doesn't get the same degree of care and, concern as if people were living there. So it's, a number one thing that I think, is undermining, neighborhoods throughout the city and county. And it's not just the city, it's suburban neighborhoods too. So that's really done a lot to this. But I guess the other thing too, if you want to buy a certain type of house in a certain area or something like that, one of the things Katie and I were talking about ahead of time is really trying to work the informal market, and like if people, say you want to move to Tonawanda, and 6 people that live in Tonawanda, call them all up and say, hey, I'm looking for a house. you know, I mean, seriously, it's not a bad idea to do stuff like that. I know it kind of cuts the realtors out of the process, but we could still help you with something like that. We do that all the time. Um, but that's how we've been trying to get around it with buyers that we're working with. We'll do like a 300-piece mailing into a specific neighborhood, specific house style, specific size, and you can pull all that out of the tax database now. So, technology has its pluses and minuses, but those are the ways to kind of counteract this. Because if you're just going to jump into the fray with everybody else, it's the odds of being successful are very, very low, and the likelihood that you have to overpay for something are pretty high. So you sort of got to try to work the edges. The other thing that we typically advise is looking around for something that's been out there for a while, and is at a certain price, and then go in and basically try to beat them down. It's really, it's kind of, I don't know how to say that not so crassly, but that's essentially and what happens sometimes too is this happens a lot, is like somebody selling a house, so they interview like 3 or 4 realtors, and it's almost like an auction, and they go with the person that tells them the highest number, and then Okay, so they put the house on the market, they get the flood of people, they've had 30 people come through, nobody buys it, and they're just sitting there. So, and that's what happens. It's like a beached whale, and everybody knows it's overpriced. And that realtor's actually got themselves in a pickle where they told the owner one thing, but reality is speaking something else. And then they try to get the owner to reduce the price. And the owner's like, well, when you get me an offer, I'll lower the price. So what you want to do, you want to be that person making the offer at, 15% less than what they're asking and maybe end up with it. So, and maybe you don't, but that situation is out there as well. Um, just trying to be tuned into that. Yeah. So you got to be
Thank you.
selective. One of the things you have to avoid when you're buying right now, Katie and I were talking about it before, is buyers get exhaustion, buyer exhaustion, and they just pay like way over just to get it over with. You don't want to do that.
Well, thanks for all that information, Michael. This question that came through is, can you talk about the process to rent back your house after you sold it, but you're waiting to move?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, this is one of my favorite techniques. It works great, and it's really a good thing. I got some young people building a house right now. I was actually talking to him yesterday. I was on the front line. Because their house is going to be ready around December 1st. And so we're just planning that out. So, well, the mechanics of it are, you actually sell your house, you do a normal 2-month closing, and then typically what's done is that you pay whatever the buyer's mortgage, taxes, and insurance are. That's typically how it's structured, for whatever the time period is. You There's different degrees of how much you can get a buyer to accept. Like some people want to be in within 2 months, they don't want to wait 4 months. So this does reduce your market a little bit, because there's some people that have to be in right now. But also, right now you can get away with this more so than ever. You can typically get away with it. The nice part about, like, sometimes people or realtors will say, well, let's just do a long closing, a 4-month closing or something like that. You don't want to do that. The longer you wait, the higher the probability something weird's going to happen. You want to get their money and you want it in your bank account. So you want to do like a typical, I'd say a 2-month closing. And, one of the things we've actually pulled this off a bunch of times, well, so many times, a bunch of times, is 4 times this year. But 4 times this year, we had people stay over and they didn't have to pay. And that was just part of the negotiation because the seller really had the upper hand. A bunch of people wanted the house. And so people let them stay for free. So that's, I don't know. So there's a lot of options there, but it is really absolutely the best way to do this. And especially it's not just older adults, I've been doing this with younger families, especially like if they got little kids, and because the way the contract is structured, if you sell your house and you're buying another one, the way it's structured is you have to be out and in on the same day. Okay, so if you got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, good luck. You know, not to mention even an older adult, different energy level maybe, or anybody. It doesn't matter. It's just trying to handle those logistics is ridiculous. So, and this method actually works really well for people that are selling and going to apartments too, because I do this with people frequently, like that are doing that, just to have like some insurance time, to make sure that they can clear out the house, maybe have a household sale, things like that. it's a really good technique to keep you in control, start to finish in the process. And there's a whole bunch of things you can do when you're selling a house now to maintain control at different points in the process, and it really lowers the stress level.
All right, thanks, Michael, for all that information. This one here, this is the last thing I'm seeing right now. There's a lot of development in Western New York, but it's all rental apartment buildings. We don't want to lose the equity we established over the years and would like to move into a low maintenance condo, but there's some building restrictions in New York State that discourage builders from condos. Do you remember what it is, and is there any lobbying to rescind the regulation?
Hmm. The final question. Does anyone remember the Great Karnak? The last question. I have a fond memory of my father laughing like a hyena in the middle of the night watching Johnny Carson. He'd get up and go, "What are you doing?" He's watching Johnny Carson. I had to throw that in there. So this is actually for your protection, and it's really important. So to lobby against it, I don't know. Well, let me explain why. And also I can give you an example of people that got really hurt. So in New York State, in order to start to have a condo association brand new, you have to have more than 50% of the units sold, and they all have to close on the same day. So if you got, just even think of, was essentially kind of a small medium project would be like 40 units. So just think about the logistics of getting 21 people ready to close on the same day, right? I mean, it's really, really difficult. So with developers just not going to buy in on that. You know, it's just too difficult. So, and that's the problem. Okay, so why is it that way? All right, so when I think it was 2008 when the financial markets imploded, at that time there were all kinds of like there's no law like that in Florida and a whole bunch of other states. So there were towers where 10% of the units were sold and closed, and people owning, living there, what have you. And then the developer went bankrupt because the financial markets went down the tubes. So here you got an unfinished building, and you got 10% of the units paying for all the maintenance for this high rise and trying to figure out what to do with their 90% shell. So, there's kind of in one sense, I mean, New York is definitely has more laws per capita than probably most other states. I'm not sure where we rank compared to others, but we're up there. But this one actually is kind of a good one because it really does protect consumers. The problem is though, is if you want to buy, a condo in the city, I mean, unless it's, 1.1 million, like on Gates Circle, I mean, there just aren't a whole lot of them around. Um, but I think that's really going to change. So, as far as when, probably in about 5 years. This is a guess on my part, my best guess. So a lot of these developers that have built these apartments or converted lofts or, what have you, over the last, I don't know, it's been going on, what, 10 years, 15 years? There's a lot of this been going on. I'd say 10 years is probably fair. Even more so the last 5. Like, I really think the end game for a lot of these companies is to convert to condos. Because what right now, getting all the advantages of newer roof, newer furnaces, newer heating plants, um, in a lot of cases, historic tax credits, those go on for a period of time. So once all that stuff starts to be less attractive, at that point, I think you'll see some of these projects convert to condos. And I think the amount of condos in the city is going to go up dramatically, probably in 5 to 10 years. So, I don't know how that matches for your timeline, but that's my analysis, of what is going to happen.
Thanks, Michael. And you mentioned tax credits. We have a question. Are you still eligible for the star exemption in any of these types of residences?
Yes, you are. As long as it's owner occupied, you're eligible for the star, I believe. Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure you are. Yeah. But I would just double check with the town assessor just to make sure. Because you're already getting a reduction on the school tax because of the HOA. But I think you are. I think in New York State in general, across the board, as long as it's homeowners association, or as long as you're owner occupied, I mean.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see if anything else comes through. Otherwise, that was a lot of wonderful information.
Cool. Good
Cool.
doing this.
I know. We appreciate you. And now I'm just seeing, thanks. We have a lot to think about. Always love your presentations.
Oh, cool.
Thank you both.
All right, great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.